around me, around me, around me, around me.
What follows is special programming for the week of Kwanzaa as we move along with our Kwanzaa celebration here. We started out with the first principle of Kwanzaa. There are 7 Ijomo, which is a unity in Kigu Chicago. Always self-determination. Ujamaa, collective work and responsibility is where we are today. And we fall back upon Dr. Maulana Karenga. The title of our episode today, The Neoliberal versus the Moral Warrior. The neoliberal, of course, is Ta-Nehisi Coates, and the moral warrior is Dr. Cornel West. There's been various commentary about the two. Ta-Nehisi Coates being the young man coming up, the young Turk in his early 40s. And, of course, Dr. Cornel West has been a warrior for many years now. He's now a senior professor at Harvard University. I can recall, when the racist there, the economic advisor that became an economic advisor under Bill Clinton. And he was also president of Harvard University. Larry Summers at one time vanished Dr. Cornel West from Harvard. Now he's back. He went on to Princeton, and he is professor emeritus from Princeton University. Nonetheless, he has been a fearless warrior for what he would call the truth, and he has been consistent with that. We've been critical of him in the past for his treatment of Barack Obama. Now, President Obama, as a late great Jerry Pippin used to say, was an Eisenhower type of a president, Eisenhower Republican, which translates out to neocon. We didn't have neocons in those days. I, like Ike, was a moderate Republican. We no longer have moderate Republicans around anymore. Even Richard Nixon said he was a conservative Republican on the election of Ronald Wilson Reagan. I never forget that date. Richard Nixon appeared on Good Morning America, and he said he was not a nut. Had Tricky Dick been alive today, what would he say about DJ Trump? Just too far out there for him to imagine what is going on. But as Dr. West said, it's also the condition of capitalism. You have to understand, Dr. West is a theologian also, so he works in a little different type of setup than Ta-Nehisi Coates, and I hope I'm not mispronouncing his name too badly. But he was raised in a secular family, and he was speaking with Dr. Charles, I believe, at Penn in Philadelphia. No, wait a minute. Yeah, to a certain extent. He's also speaking with some religious type in Chicago that went to a spiritual. That's actually where he said that. But again, there are many, many people that do not have, quote unquote, the spiritual bearing. But that does not separate the individual out from the tradition of, quote unquote, the black church, the church of Richard Allen, the church of Dr. Martin Luther King. Now, don't confuse those people with the evangelicals today, or the offshoots even within the so-called African evangelical church. Many of those people are have the mega churches, totally different atmosphere there. We shouldn't get the things confused. But the whole conversation here with the 8 years we were in power. Now I'm assuming, not putting words into Mr. Coates' mouth here, but when he said we were in power, that is a collective we, and how it appeared to the majority population, that is Europeans. There are many people in this population that are not Europeans. So that has to be confused. We don't want to confuse the so-called term white, which is purely a political term, there to adhere more people to those people than would normally be attributed to them. And at one time we had Latinos thrown in there and virtually every other person within the country. And we still have Semitic peoples. Now I'm talking not necessarily about people that call themselves Jewish people. We're talking about Arabs, which are the big majority of Semitic people, that how they are labeled when they're entering into the U.S. in terms of the political classification race. Now, this is not the first time this happened. In apartheid South Africa, they had a race set up also. Well, in this country, it means a different thing. Ta-Nehisi Coates is very, very careful about that, the historic situation as to race, how the Civil War was fought, how it went on after that into an apartheid nation, where they lynched people literally for going to school, going to church, various other things, being entrepreneurial even. People were excluded from things like FHA loans, which DJ Trump's father made his millions, literally building houses. But African people were excluded as a matter of law. Now, those are against that background, when you talk about that, and you get to the presidency of Barack Obama, no one would deny that had there not been a Dr. King, had there not been a Jesse Jackson, Mrs. Chisholm in New York, all of these African Americans running for president, Dr. Al Sharpton running for president. On the backs of those people came Barack Obama. And he was elected president, but not only by that, his appeal to working people, particularly the white working class. He won that vote. Now, some other parts of it he did not. But if we go and look at that very, very carefully, we understand why this came about. In the 8 years, yes, President Obama was there, and it was universally believed, as Ta-Nehisi Coates said, his family, they were called monkeys, apes, all kinds of things, was attributed to them. Now, this was not a part necessarily of DJ Trump. Yes, DJ Trump done some preparatory work with the people that were falsely accused in Central Park and with the Bircher thing. But that was part of a big campaign by Monopoly Media. They pushed it as far as they could. They sent hyenas like Rush Limbaugh out there to call his followers to go and vote for Hillary the Monster Clinton. Hillary the Monster Clinton and Bill the Monster ran the most racist campaign in history. And then came the old man McCain's campaign and Sarah Palin. They threw everything they could. So why was 2008 and 2012 different? First of all, Hillary the Monster Clinton was not Barack Obama. She had a history. Her husband, Wild Bill Clinton, had a history of incarcerating more young Africans than DJ Trump has been able to do to date. So those are the things we look at. And then we go into foreign policy that Ta-Nehisi Coates talks about, and Dr. West criticizes the drones and other things. But you have to understand that the foreign policy of Barack Obama, there was some nuances that were Barack Obama's, but primarily it was Wilsonian foreign policy, the same foreign policy that Hillary Monster Clinton would have followed, and the same policy that DJ Trump is following today. In other words, the Tarzan and Jane policy. The Democratic Republic of Korea is the natives. The Cubans are the natives. The Venezuelans are the natives. And he's even treating China and Russia as the natives. And he's Tarzan swinging through the tree, I guess. But anyway, nonetheless, it is a 20th century policy, not a 21st century policy. And this is where the divisions come. But are the divisions actually as big as one would think? No, they're not. Dr. West wrote Race Matters. Ta-Nehisi Coates would not deny race matters at all. Their difference is on Barack Obama's, basically his foreign policy, and some criticisms of him. Now, he wrote the definitive book. He works for the Atlantic. Do we need to say no more? The Atlantic magazine is part of the monopoly press. And they allow him to say certain things, and certain things he can't say. But they give him a lot of leeway in saying certain things, and we'll present that to you in a minute. Some excerpts from what he said. We're going to put in from the Hickenbottom lecture there. That was Justice Hickenbottom at the University of Pennsylvania. We'll put a little bit of that in. And Ta-Nehisi Coates interviewed by his own publisher that published 2 of his books. Now, this is a man that left university and went out for 20 years to practice the craft of writing. Professor Reed, Ishmael Reed, out of Oakland there, Berkeley / he talked about Ta-Nehisi Coates and his precision as a writer. And he also says that Professor Reed is a writer par excellence. We didn't have to say that, but he is, no doubt about it. And Professor Reed writing, you can find him on Facebook. He was talking about Richard Wright and how he had patrons in the left, particularly in the Communist Party, the masses where he wrote, etc. That was essential for an African writer to break out. You have to be sponsored by someone, but if you're sponsored by the Atlantic, they have a readership. And they've had a readership of liberals, neoliberals, for a very, very long time. An establishment magazine. It's not something that is running bubblegum out there. So people read it. And as Ta-Nehisi Coates said in Hickenbottom lecture, I believe it's Hickenbottom lecture, that he is a writer, like all writers, writes for all people. And of course, obviously, there are more Europeans in America that are buying books than there are Africans in America that's buying books. Now, we're not talking about Trump's books. That's a little different situation there. But what we are saying is everyone has an audience. And we talk that theme when we address internet radio people. Some of them call themselves podcasters. Every person has their writer, their audience. There are people out there that have 500,000 people, have 1 million people, 2 million people. There's the TED Talks that have millions of people that go to those. There's the NPRs and all those characters out there. But we have people that you've never heard of that have 500,000 people. Jerry Pippin that had 2.5 million people that came to visit him annually. Period. I think we're up to about 1.6 or 7 million that have, and we're almost on next month. We'll be in the business for 10 years. Most of them came later. But the situation is there is plenty out there in social media. Barack Obama talked about that with Prince, is it Harry or William? Well, anyway, Prince, whomever it is, was interviewing Barack Obama on the BBC. And he talked about social media and its importance. One thing you remember about social media, although we are on some of these media platforms here in America, like iHeart, etc., Speaker, but these platforms go all over the world. We get people all over the world. And more as we move more into the 21st century, these platforms are going to be coming out of places like China, etc. There are more people on the internet now, and they've been for the last 10 years, than there are people in the United States. So the internet is not just North America, it's not just Eurocentric. Now some of the companies are now, but they will come and they will go. Apple has a problem now. They had a crummy battery. They're being sued for that. So in other words, we're starting to see things move in different directions and different people moving things. So the mission for Ta-Nehisi Coates as a writer is to not only write in the U.S. or to write, say, for the neoliberals or African Americans. He's writing for the world. Professor Reed just finished a book in the Indian language. So, in other words, writing in various languages, books translated in many, many different dialects. I assume Professor Reed will be coming with something in Chinese shortly here. But you write to where the people are. And this whole schism where Ta-Nehisi Coates canceled his Twitter because of the conversations coming. And many people during the Obama administration said, well, President Obama is not doing enough. What in the hell did they expect President Obama to do? I mean, given the criticism that he was illegitimate president. He had a Democrat, when he had a so-called Democratic majority, they didn't do very much. They did get national health care, Obamacare done. They could have gotten a single payer done, but the weak-kneed Democrats that he had wouldn't do it because they were too busy running around carrying the water for Wall Street, the big pharma, little pharma, and everybody else. So then you have this Republican administration that has a Wall Street banking agenda. They made no secret about that. They come in and pass a tax cut for the rich. And the little rich will get some crumbs from the table. It's just a matter of how many crumbs they put down here for these characters. But it's not for them. The healthcare system, the rates will go up. And that will affect the whole ecostructure of healthcare. Not only insurance rates will go up. You see insurance companies buying each other, consolidating, getting in there with healthcare companies also. And as they consolidate, you'll hear less competition. There is no invisible hand. You can forget that. There is a big hand, and it's not invisible. It's coming. So now where do they go get the extra money? Well, they go into the social net, the social programs. That'll be what they'll be doing. You get a checklist. Those are the big things that we're arguing about as we move through Kwanzaa here. So as we go out of here, we'll do the sports very quickly, enough editorializing. We'll hear from Dr. West, Professor Coates, and the lot. And you'll get an idea. We're going to do some heavy editing here to get this on some of our networks. Try to go about 100 minutes. Nonetheless, the Celtics were at the Hornets. Celtics 102-91. The Mavericks were in Indiana. Mavericks 98-94 with the Pacers, the Wizards, and Hawks 113-99 for the Washington Wizards. The Knickerbockers were in Chicago. Bulls 92-87. The Nuggets of Denver were at the T-Wolves, 128 for the T-Wolves and 125 for the Nuggets. The Nets were at the Pelicans in New Orleans, 128 for the Pelicans and 113 for the Nets. The Raptors were at the Thunder in OKC, Thunder 124-107. The Cavaliers were out west. The Kings 109-95. Full night here. The Jazz were at the Warriors at Golden State. 126 for the Warriors. 101 for the Jazz. And the Grizzlies were at the Lakers in Los Angeles. Grizzlies 109-99. There were, I believe, a couple of games of last night. Let's look at them very quickly here. On the 26th. Utah was at West Virginia, Utah 30-14. I'm not sure which bowl they were in, but anyway, they were somewhere. Duke and Northern Illinois, Duke 36-14, and Kansas State and UCLA, Kansas State 35-17, and that was on Tuesday night. Sorry about that one. We weren't here. Southern Mississippi and Florida State. The old school that Bobby Biden used to represent. Anyway, 42-13 Florida State. Iowa and Boston College. Iowa 27-20. And Arizona and Purdue, the Boilermakers, 38-25. Texas and Missouri, the Longhorns. 33 Longhorns and Missouri 16. And then we'll go to Friday very, very quickly here. Wake Forest will be at Texas A&M, North Carolina at Arizona State, Kentucky at Northwestern, and New Mexico State at Utah State, and UCLA, O.J. Simpson's old school, at Ohio State. And on Sunday, Louisville at Mississippi State, Iowa State at Memphis, Washington at Penn State number 9. And then we get to the gritty of it here. Wisconsin at Miami, the old Orange Bowl, I suppose. It's now called the Hard Rock Stadium in Florida. They'll be warm. And Michigan and South Carolina on the 1st of January. UCF and Auburn, Notre Dame and LSU, Georgia and number 2 Oklahoma, and the big one, Alabama versus Clemson. This will do it for us. On to Mr. Coates, Dr. West, and the big debate, neocons versus the moralists, or whatever we're going to call this. Anyway, we'll call it something. Good day. We'll talk to you later.
Much annoyed me. It is like, you see a black quarterback playing, and the quarterback's playing really well. You say he's athletic. You know what I mean? Well, yeah, he is, but you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, there's some other things going on that you ain't seeing, you know? And I felt like that. I don't want to be athletic. I don't want to be described as athletic. You know what I mean? So it was really a chance to kind of, describe myself for myself.
Okay, great. So what are your hopes for your writing? What do you want it to do when you push send and it goes out into the world? What are your hopes?
Well, I'm a very emotional writer. I write with a great deal of feeling. I obviously, try to do a tremendous amount of research and reporting to make sure those feelings are substantiated. But writing comes from a very, very emotional place for me. And I want to communicate that emotion to the reader, hopefully. That's what I'm trying to do. That's what I hope to do. I mean, the first thing is for me, I want to feel good about what I'm doing. Mm-hmm. I want it to thrill me. And my hope is that in thrilling me, it will thrill the reader.
Terrific. You talk a lot about the ancestry of black literature, calling it a long line of dream breakers. Mm-hmm. Could you say a little bit more about what that means and what dream or dreams does your work try to break?
Yeah, I mean, that goes back to Between the World and Me and this concept of the dream, and this idea that there's a kind of myth that the country tells itself about itself. We saw that just yesterday in some of the ridiculous comments about the Civil War. I won't rehash that. I might a little bit.
I have a question here about
okay.
it.
All right.
Yeah.
Should I wait? Okay.
You can. It's
okay.
next.
All right. I asked a question, actually, and I'll try to get those two together.
Well, this question was really why do in your essay, Why Do So Few Blacks Study the Civil War? You basically answer your own question by saying the Civil War is a story for white people, acted out by white people on white people's terms, in which blacks feature strictly as stock characters and props. Mm-hmm. Could you place that in the context of yesterday?
Of course, I can. And I can place it in the context of the previous question. White people in this country, people who believe that being white is really important to them, have a way of describing the world and a way of describing the country. You saw that in the description, yesterday or the day before yesterday by, someone who works in the highest offices of government. It's not a factual description. There's no science or any sort of, anything or history or, primary sources or scholarship behind it. It's not about scholarship. The Civil War is the most obvious case of this. It's not hard to know what the Civil War is about. Like, there are wars that's actually kind of hard. Like World War I, if you're trying to figure out what actually caused war, it's actually quite difficult. And historians have all sorts of arguments about it. 30 Years' War. What were they actually fighting about? Was it actually religion? And historians go back and forth, and they have... serious historians don't have arguments about what the Civil War was about. And there's a reason for that. Because the people who started the Civil War said why they were doing it.
Right.
They were very clear. You can Google, you know what I mean? Like right now, on your little iPhone,
Yeah.
And you can Google, declarations of, articles of secession, and they'll tell you, you know what I mean? Mississippi will tell you, we are thoroughly aligned with the institution of African slavery. Very clear. South Carolina, and their declaration is very, very clear. Vice President of the Confederacy, very, 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 very clear about what, the evidence is overwhelming. It is as if someone is, looking at the sky, and it's blue. It's clearly blue. Now it's yellow. But when you want to run the world, you can tell everybody the sky is yellow. And you can make movies as though the sky was yellow. And you can write fiction as though the sky was yellow. And you can write whole, histories, which are not actually histories, about how the sky is yellow. And you can be right next to the President of the United States, or be President of the United States, believing the sky is yellow. And African American literature has always stood in opposition to that. It says the sky is blue. I don't care what you say, sky is blue. Sky is blue. And I insist on saying the sky is blue. And you can, delude yourself in any way, you want. But I can see the sky. and I know what it is. And so as a writer, for me, it's very, very important to, sort of stand in that tradition. To not be somebody who allays people, who makes it, more comfortable, for them to, live in myth. This guy told me today, he said, it's on Twitter, I tweeted out this, things about how not to be more stupid, right? About how not to be stupid about the Civil War. Because it is stupid. Like, how not to be stupid about the Civil War. John Kelly's being stupid. And Trump is is professionally stupid. Just professionally. It's just what he does. And I said, well, how dare you? You know what I mean? Don't you want to convince people? Why would you call them stupid? I said, I'm not going to make it, I'm not going to make this easy for you. I'm not going to talk nice to you, man. You know what I'm saying? I'm going to talk to you like the world talked to me. I'm going to be direct. I'm going to be like, you say something, I'm going to tell you it's stupid. I'm not going, you might not want to say that. Here's another way to think about it. I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that. Nobody who loves me talks to me like that. My wife don't talk to me like that. My friends don't talk to me like that. They're direct. If I'm doing something, say, Ta-Nehisi, that's stupid. And so that's how I'm going to talk to folks. I'm not, I'm not going to, cater or, twist myself in any sort of way.
Okay. We'll take a break from the Civil War, and we might come back to it. We might not. In My President Was Black, you say that President Obama became a symbol of black people's everyday extraordinary Americanness. And you have a wonderful essay about Michelle Obama called The American Girl. Right. What is it about Americanness for this particular black couple that makes them so important and such a theme in your work?
Because I think, from the perspective of the integrationist, the notion is that black people actually fit quite well within the mores, the traditions, the culture, the kind of quote-unquote middle-class bourgeois values that we talk about, every day. And white supremacy has long been premised on the denial of that. I just want to be clear. I mean, I'm not really a poster child for those values. I think there's serious questions to be raised about those values. I'm just analyzing it as it is, so I don't want to take this as an endorsement. That idea that you should necessarily have to look like the first family looked in order to be accepted. In this country, I certainly do not believe that. But having said that, the way the country works is it sets a standard. With all of the problems of gender and class and et cetera that, are embedded in that standard. And it says this group over here does not, measure up. They don't have family values. They don't, care about their kids. They don't parent. They're drug addicts. They're criminals. They're barbaric. They're savage, et cetera. And we have always had, people who, conducted themselves almost as if they were crafted to be walking refutations of that idea. And that's what the Obamas were. And I think that is, an often unremarked upon part A of their power and why I think folks were so threatened by them. There are black people, in America who I love, who I adore, black popular figures, but they don't threaten in the same way. We have this idea that it's usually, the thug that threatens. Right. In fact, that's not true. No. That's what they think of you anyway. So, there's no real threat there. But, here you got these, two black, Ivy League trained lawyers, you know what I mean, with their, 2 beautiful kids and the grandmother lives with them, you know what I mean? The dog named Bo, you know what I mean? Like, the dog named Bo. I halfway don't believe it. You know what I'm saying? Like, but it's a model. It says, listen, this can be a TV show. Like, this is what, you understand what I'm saying? Yeah, well, not anymore. Not anymore.
Yeah, right.
Right. But this is what you say you wanted. This is what you said. You said if we conducted ourselves according to this standard, we would be accepted into this country. And what happened? Half the opposition party said that man is not an American. Mm-hmm. He's not a legitimate president. Right. And that woman is not actually a woman. Right. And they made postcards of her looking like an ape. Mm-hmm. And they mocked the family, and they made postcards of them with watermelon patches on the White House lawn. And to me, like, I don't really ascribe to that standard, but to me, the great power in it is it exposes the rank hypocrisy. They don't dislike you because you don't accord to their values. They dislike you because of who you are. Mm-hmm. And there's no kind of behavior. There's no way you could conduct yourself. They don't care about your dog named Bo. They really don't. There literally are studies about this, man, where people would see the dog. They did this. I swear to God, it was an experiment. You can Google this. They showed people the dog, and when people found out it was Obama's dog, they had a lower opinion of the dog. This happened. It sounds, no, I'm serious. Yo, Google it. This happened. Yes. This is a very, very real thing. And I think the scientists, I think it's Michael Tesla who did the studies. But it's a very, very real thing. Mm-hmm. They don't care about your dog. They hate you, man. They hate you. And I think until you can really grapple with that, deep-seated hatred, that they would have, a man like that. And it would be acceptable to refer to him as a food stamp president. Like, that's okay. Mm-hmm. That's acceptable, when he's giving an address before Congress to, yell out, "You lie." That's fine. That's okay. That's okay. There's no way you can conduct yourself to stop them from doing it. They hate you. They hate you. They don't, hate you because, you don't dress a certain way or you ain't doing this. They hate you, who you are.
There was that tan suit.
You said what?
There was that tan suit.
The tan suit, yeah. Could get rid of the tan suit, yeah.
So let me move on a little bit. Is it fair to think about the case for reparations as the essay that made you famous?
Boy, I hate it when you say it like that.
That's why I said it that way.
Oh.
Not that you wanted to be, I'm not saying that you wanted to be famous or that, that this is the reason for doing it, but that it sort of took things to a different level.
What would I say? What would I say? I would say that was an essay that caused more people to pay attention to the work I was doing and recognize my name. That's what I'm not comfortable with that.
Right.
And I'm not comfortable with that. And I'm not trying to, criticize you or anything like that. I'm uncomfortable with it because that essay is about Mr. Clyde Ross, and it's about his life, and it feels kind of grotesque to have sat at the table of, a 92-year-old black man who tells you about how he was robbed in Mississippi. Came to the west side of Chicago, got robbed again on the west side of Chicago, and people, looked him in the face and acted like he hadn't been robbed. And people trust you with their stories, and you talk about how it made you famous. It just feels a little. Yeah,
no, I don't disagree, and I think, and maybe made you famous is the wrong way to put it, right? I think you said it quite well. It's the essay where people started paying more attention to you or different attention. What could you talk a little bit about the writing of that piece?
Sure. Yeah, no, it was an exciting piece to write because I started writing it really in, so it came out in 14.
But I feel like people are starting to care less about what's going on. I want to find ways to protest, but people are like, there's no way you can change anything, this is what's going to be. And I feel like, well, one example would be like in 2015, more people were more like, people wanted to make a change. I feel like it was more of a protestful environment with music and everything. Then I feel like as it progressed, people started to care less and started caring more about other situations. So I was wondering, like, what do I do in this situation?
I don't know, because I'm not at your school, you know? And I mean that, you know, I don't know what's at work. I can tell you how I am. I do the work I do because I can't do anything else. I do the work I do because, you know, I need to be able to, you know, wake up in the morning and look myself, you know, in the face and feel good about myself. So probably the real question is, what do you need to do? You know, like what is the thing that's compelling you? Regardless of what everybody else at your school is saying, or regardless of what some dude, you know, on the stage is going to tell you to do. You know, it's really, you know, about your own, you know, feeling, which you feel like you absolutely have to do, must do, in order to satisfy your own moral standard. So I would actually throw the question back at you.
Oh, okay.
Hello?
Yep.
Hi, I have two questions, sorry.
You can ask
So
one.
first question is,
No, you can ask one question.
Oh, man.
Sorry.
Pick the best one. Pick the best
Make
one.
it count.
Okay. I teach African American history here in Philadelphia. Is there a chapter or a chapter set that you might suggest for us to focus on, and why?
Nah.
Can I proceed to my other question?
Yeah, you can.
Okay. Are you critical of Obama at all in this book?
I would ask you to read the book.
Okay. Where are we with person? Oh, there we are.
Mr.
I'll
Coates?
take another one.
Okay.
Because that was, yeah.
Okay.
No disrespect, but that was,
No,
I'll
that's
take
fine.
another.
It's your show.
Mr. Coates, I'm hoping that you can expound a little bit on your thought that white people are crazy. In particular, I'm interested in your thoughts on institutions of higher learning like the University of Pennsylvania and what they do to potentially perpetuate white people being crazy.
Right.
Thank you.
Well, you would know the answer to the second more than I would. I think it's my first time even at UPenn. Well, no, I came here once before with Tom Segru. That's right, I did.
Your second.
I did. So this is my second. I have not spent much time here, so I don't know what specifically UPenn does. As to white people being crazy, I think it's important to delineate something. And I say this over and over again, but it's important because, you know, we don't want to tumble into our own dream and our own lie. It is not the fact of straight hair. It is not the fact of lighter skin. It is not any sort of physical anything, any sort of biological, ancestral, genetic, anything when we talk about race that we refer to. In other words, it is not European abstraction that makes, quote unquote, white people crazy. It is the structures and systems that say having European abstraction somehow means more that makes white people, well, white in the first place, you know, and thus right. Crazy. This is a country that, it's very sad to recount this. This is a country that has its origins and then continued after it was founded in 250 years of enslavement, okay? This was not like enslavement as a side thing. This was enslavement that made the country actually exist. What do I mean by that? And I've said this so many times, I'm blue in the face. At the start of the Civil War, the vast majority of multimillionaires in this country, and preponderance of multimillionaires, like if you looked at where their money was made, it was in slaveholding. That was where the wealth of the country was. If you wanted the largest region per capita of slaveholders in this country, you went to the Mississippi Valley. The 4 million African Americans, enslaved African Americans in this country, it was something on the order of $4 billion, somewhere around $75 billion today. Give you, an idea how much money that is. That is you taking, at that period of time, all the railroads, all the nascent factories, all the shipyards, all the banks, all the productive capacity of this country, put together and you put it in one single pile. It was not worth more than the 4 million enslaved black people in this country. After the war was fought, after some 700,000, 800,000 people died, we did not say to those 4 million black people, okay, we recognize we were completely wrong to enslave you. Now go and be happy and pursue the American dream. Instead, we followed that with 100 years of the most lethal campaign of domestic terrorism in American history. It's white supremacist violence. I mean, we literally lynched people for trying to get an education. We lynched people for going to church. We bombed churches. I mean, this is a thing that actually happened. In the 1930s and 40s, when we decided we wanted to create a middle class in this country through housing, and we wanted to create more wealth in this country, we specifically excluded black people in the laws. We decided we wanted to have a social safety net, social security, unemployment insurance. We took steps to exclude black people in the laws. We decided we wanted to have a GI Bill. For folks that were coming home after World War II, we took steps to exclude black people. Now, there's a lot of talk about, and there should be necessarily, about what that does to black people, but more thought should be put into what that does to white people. Because in order to brutalize somebody in that sort of fashion, over a period of centuries, you see, you have to tell yourself certain things. You have to tell yourself that that person isn't human. And what you can find in this country is the fields of history, fields of biology, nascent fields of genetics, anthropology, religion, business, all the sectors of the country, athletics, marshaled to tell people in this country that this man or this woman sitting next to you is less human than you are. That might make you crazy. I mean, it might legitimately, it is crazy. I keep going back to this. It is crazy.
Fairness, and they're concerned about a racist criminal justice system. And it's a beautiful thing to see this kind of moral and spiritual awakening taking place among the athletes. So they represent not just athletic excellence, but they're now aspiring to spiritual and moral excellence. Excellence is about unarmed truth, unapologetic love. You step down in order to let the world know you have a love for these people who are not being treated right. You have a love for these people who are being treated unfairly. Now, as you know, I'm a Christian, though, brother, so every flag is under the cross for me. And the cross signifies unarmed truth, unapologetic love. Patriotism is fine, but when it scapegoats Mexicans and Arabs and Jews and gays and lesbians and trans, when it scapegoats black people and brown people, then there's a critique to be brought to bear in the name of truth, in the name of love. And it's fairly clear that President Trump has a disrespect for the American people. He has a disrespect for the flag when he scapegoats American people and when he lies to the American people. Mendacity is a form of violation in patriotism. It's a form of violation in the face of truth and in the face of love. So the question becomes, how wonderful to see the white brothers and sisters, all the different colors, standing up out of a love for black people who are being victimized too often by a racist criminal justice system. It's a beautiful thing to behold.
Paris, I want you to be able to respond. And by the way, a football player, I should say, and didn't get rehired.
And that's unfair to Brother Colin. But no, Brother Paris has a point. There's no doubt that an awakening has taken place in the last 12 to 18 months. Just because people are in solidarity now in an explicit way, and they weren't before, doesn't mean it's still wrong, it's still unjust, and it still required somebody to stand up. At that time, we had a voice in the wilderness. Brother Colin. We read Brother Eric Reed's magnificent op-ed piece. Oh, he's a truth teller. He stood there with Colin. Sometimes it's just a few who are speaking the truth. Sometimes the truth catches fire, and that's what's happening now. So, Brother Paris, you're right. A year ago, they didn't stand. They were still sleepwalking. Now, I'll say to you, Brother Paris, are you sleepwalking? Are you going to deny that the victims of a racist criminal justice system are not part and parcel of the reasons why these brothers are kneeling down? You know that racial injustice is an integral part of why they are expressing their love in the way that they are.
And Dr. West, I've never...
Taking for, he denies it, and if you defend him, then you're defending the denial. You and I know that it happens all the time. You and I know that these brothers are standing up as they kneel in order to put a spotlight on this issue. That means race is very much, not just race, justice, fairness. Race is too abstract. Justice, fairness, treating black people with dignity and decency. That's the fundamental issue as to why they're doing what they're doing. The president denies it. You support the president, therefore you support the denial, as I understand it, unless you're breaking with the president publicly at this moment. That'd be a beautiful thing, too, my brother.
Paris, I want you to be able to respond. Yes, at the Olympics, they were pilloried for that. But so you're saying they weren't disrespecting the flag, but it was viewed at the time as hugely disrespectful. And Paris's point that this is disrespectful to the flag, that it's unpatriotic to do this during the national anthem, what do you say?
Well, I mean, the important thing, though, Brother Cooper, is that you got two claims being made by the president. One is race has nothing to do with it. That's a lie. Second is disrespectful. No. My father served in the U.S. Army with dignity in a Jim Crow army, but he served in the name of truth and freedom, so that flag signifies at its best a freedom for people to dissent if they can do so with a love and with a concern with the least of these. So there's many people in the Army who in no way feel disrespected if people are fighting for justice, because the flag is not the monopoly of one group. It's for the expression of those who are fighting for truth, liberty, and freedom across the board. So this idea that somehow disrespect is a motivation for stepping, for kneeling. I mean, good God, in the 1960s, we had a whole host of folk who turned their backs on the flag because for them it signified criminality. Vietnam, it signified a whole host of things that were violations of humanity. And so in this sense, the idea of disrespect, especially coming from Donald Trump, he is the disrespecter par excellence. So by what moral authority, what spiritual authority does he have to talk about disrespect? He's been disrespecting the American people and the flag ever since he won in many ways when it comes to our precious Mexicans and Arabs and Palestinians and Jews and black people and gays and lesbians and trans and bisexuals and others. So in that sense, let's just be honest, Brother Paris.
Paris, you heard
shallow.
Paris, you heard Meg saying those people, our anthem, calling them sons of bitches in front of a overwhelmingly white crowd in Alabama?
I think from now...
yeah, but the idea that it doesn't have anything to do with race, my brother, that's what we're talking about. And God bless your beloved grandfather, though. I know he lived with dignity in his own way. But you and I know when it comes to the great black national anthem written by Rosamond and James Weldon Johnson, if that anthem was associated with a black supremacy that mistreated white brothers and sisters, that had police, that had economic, civic, educational expressions that somehow was subordinating other folk, many black people wouldn't stand at that anthem either. So it's not a question of just one anthem versus another, just any flag, any anthem. If it stands in the way of truth, stands in the way of love, it ought to be criticized. So it's a question of morality and spirituality. The problem is President Trump, he's all spectacle, no moral substance. He's cold-hearted, he's mean-spirited. He's involved in scapegoating as a way of manipulating and dividing American people in order for him to keep his visibility. He's a Frankenstein created in many ways by mass media, and now he's locked into it. And there are no grounds, my dear brother Paris, for any kind of serious defense of such behavior. And I think 10 years from now, when you watch yourself on television, God bless you, you're going to say, oh, my God, was I defending this kind of behavior of this kind of president, this kind of xenophobic president, this kind of president, stirring such contempt toward the weak, such contempt toward the vulnerable? That has no spiritual and moral grounds whatsoever. I don't care what color the president is. I don't care who the president is. It just happens to be President Trump.
Dr.
And Hillary Putnams and Israel Schefflers and Samuel Beers and Martin Kilsons and Preston Williams and Judith Slars. They took me.
And that was big for me. You know, it's not a small thing to be a writer and be able to make a living writing at all.
Right. And so let's skip ahead from May of 2008 to...
The way they describe it, it's very clear it's not incidental. So when Nick Kristof says, you know, for instance, you know, don't call these people in Oregon, you know, bigoted or racist, you know, because they voted for Trump, okay. But then the next line is, because that's where I'm from.
Right.
It's not a mistake.
Right.
You understand? Like, it's not a mistake. You know, he's not, and maybe he would, you know, if he were here, he would say, right, you're right, I'm not, you know, totally objective. Maybe that's not, you know, what he was saying. But I'm saying that has consequences. You know, when, you know, Bernie says, you know, I'm ashamed that, you know, when he, you know, tells young Latinas I talk about in the piece, the problem with the Democratic Party is identity politics. We got to get rid of the identity politics. And a week earlier, you know, you see him tweeting out, I come from the white working class, and I'm ashamed of the Democratic Party's inability to speak to them. Well, it's one or the other, brother.
Right.
Bernie, it's one or the other. You know what I mean? Either where you're from matters or it don't.
Right.
You know, you can't have both. And so, you know, what haunts this debate constantly is the idea that if I'm talking about being black, I'm somehow bringing something extra to it. But when you presume that the world is white, and right from that perspective, you somehow are doing something that's neutral. You're not, you know, bringing in any sort of bias or anything like that. I would grant you that I make my arguments in a very directed and forceful way, but part of that is I do have to recognize the fact that I have a very large megaphone. I got that megaphone. I got that position on the shoulders of a lot of other black writers living in debt who schooled me. I got that position because of certain experiences that I had, you know, in Baltimore that I bring to bear at Howard University. As you know, y'all messing up my moment, man. Yeah, that's right. You tell it. That's right. That's the point I was making. I'm saying I didn't come here. You know what I mean? I'd be damned if I came here to sort of shuffle and, you know what I mean, play patty cake with these people.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, that's an embarrassment to everybody else that didn't get that. You know, you know, I'll be in these. Kid asked me, they said, you know, who are you writing for besides yourself? He said, who are you writing for? Because he knew I was going to say that. I said, let me tell you something. I'm writing for that kid in 1995, a long time ago, who's at Howard University and read the New Republic and picked up the New Republic and saw an excerpt of The Bell Curve, a book arguing for his intellectual inferiority.
Right.
And his only resource was to go and fume with all the other black students and black professors that had no real ability to make his protest heard out in the world. Now, you know, granted, there was some protests in that issue from other Ivy League professors, which I don't want to get into that, but it's a different taint, a different sort of thing, because we were angry. We were pissed. Do you understand? And so I have a responsibility, I feel like, channel that, to bring that, that's what's missing. You know, it's kind of chummy, respectful, you know, sort of thing, you know, that folks do, you know, who have, now I'm going off, you know, who have certain faculty positions with people or certain relationships with people. Listen, that ain't my world, man. I came from a black world. You understand what I'm saying? That's the tradition in which I am. And so being that there aren't too many people with this kind of audience, I just feel like I got to represent that to the fullest. You know what I mean? And be really direct and clear about that. And push these people, man, because they need to be pushed. Mm-hmm. They need to be uncomfortable, like we uncomfortable. Right. You know, they need to...
You know? You got to make it hot. Because it's hot for us. You know what I'm saying? You got to make it hot for them.
Right.
You know?
Right, absolutely. What we're going to do is maybe turn it to you guys, if you're not too hot. And we'll take some questions from the audience. We have some people with